cardiovascular manifestations, the psychiatrist for depression, the neurologist for refractory epilepsy, especially at night or stroke, the anesthetist for a difficult intubation, the urologist for nocturia or impotence, the endocrinologist because of hypothyroidism or acromegaly, the ENT surgeon, the gastroenterologist, the hematologist with unexplained polycythemia, and of course the chest physician as well. And there are 4 reasons for this underdiagnosis in my mind. The first is patient unawareness. The patient is asleep, of course, and really he is blissfully unaware most often of what is happening in sleep. The partner acceptance. Our Indian housewives especially are remarkably tolerant and patient and often will not complain or dare complain. So partner acceptance is a factor. And then there is a great public lack of knowledge about this one disease because it's a relatively newly recognized condition. And we as a medical profession lack in terms of our basic education on this disease. A study from the Royal College of Physicians showed that the medical students in the UK received a median of 5 minutes teaching in all aspects of sleep medicine in their curriculum, and that was in the mid-90s. And I think the average Indian graduate gets about 5 minutes less than that. And the consequences of undiagnosed OSA are, it's expensive not just to the individual but also to society. Underdiagnosis is costly because it costs the community. And of course, you've got to factor in indirect losses like productivity, accidents, etc., which are especially relevant to you in the workforce. How do these patients present you? They're often self-referred. Most of my patients say, I read about this condition, I did a Google search and came up with your name. Many have heard about it on TV, and many have heard about it from fellow sufferers. One patient with OSA who's happy on his CPAP machine will spot another and will say, go and get yourself treated and tested. Only rarely are they referred by the doctors, but that is changing, of course, as awareness increases, and there's a range of specialists involved, as I have mentioned. These are the 3 cardinal symptoms of obstructive sleep apnea: snoring, excessive daytime sleepiness, apneas which are witnessed by the spouse, and or nocturnal choking. Snoring, as you know, is an inspiratory vibration of the soft tissue of the oropharynx. It denotes a partially occluded airway. It's very common. I would say that about 60% of you in this room would be snorers if you asked your spouses. It's influenced by age, by sex, by weight, by position, smoking, alcohol, your nasal obstruction. It's almost inevitably present in OSA. It would be rare to get someone with OSA who does not snore. It's the commonest single reason for a referral for a sleep study or PSG, polysomnography. But snoring alone has a low diagnostic accuracy for OSA because it is a non-specific symptom. What about the snoring in OSA? Well, it's a unique kind of snoring. It's extremely loud. It's disruptive. It's not the butt of jokes. It's the kind which disturbs the spouse, drives her out of the room, and sometimes drives her out of the house. It can cause marital discord, in fact. That kind of snoring is what we're talking about. It can actually cause relationship disharmony and marital breakup. And really, in many ways, you think the patient is more often the partner because the individual concerned is quite unaware of what is happening. I would say about 95% of OSA patients will report it, and because it is so common in the general population, it's a poor predictor of OSA. The absence of snoring makes it unlikely, and always obtain an account from the bed partner. This is one condition where when you interview your patient, you need to speak to spouse and patient together. Because if you ask, do you snore? The man will often say no, and the wife will often say yes simultaneously. There's a great divergence between patient and spouse's reporting of this one symptom. Now bear in mind that the average snore intensity at 40 decibels is equivalent to light traffic around you. But we're talking of 60 and sometimes 70 decibels, which is like a jackhammer going out across the road outside your window. So it's really loud, disruptive snoring. And bear in mind that snoring alone per se, even in the absence of the full-blown OSA syndrome, is a major risk factor for hypertension, for stroke, and for coronary artery disease. And this is just a humorous rhyme. Snoring kills. Last night I slew my wife and stretched her on the flooring. I was loath to take her life, but had to stop her snoring. And how many of us who have slept with a snoring partner sometimes get this almost urge to murder is not just a joke. And this is a recent article, and you must have read this recently, death for a student from China who killed his snoring roommate just because he was so sleep deprived after weeks and weeks of sharing a room with someone with heavy snoring. So it's not just a joke. The next cardinal symptom is excessive daytime sleepiness. Like snoring, it's common and therefore a poor discriminator of OSA. I would say about 30% of the general population, if you ask them, will admit to feeling sleepy at any one point in time. Not all of them have OSA. Most of them are just sleep deprived. You have a bad night on call and the next night you're feeling shattered. You must differentiate true sleepiness, which is the urge to sleep, from tiredness, from lethargy, from malaise. So you've got to tease that symptom out a little. And as I said, sleep deprivation, shift work, which all of you are familiar with, and drugs and stimulants like alcohol, for example, are far commoner causes of excessive daytime sleepiness than OSA. And I put that up in order here. Narcolepsy, of course, is another condition where you get an overwhelming urge to sleep. In what situations do my OSA patients sleep? Well, they can sleep while giving me an interview or while taking a history. They can sleep not just while attending a lecture like this, but while giving a lecture. I've had patients who go to sleep while driving almost as a routine on the Bombay-Pune highway, and you can imagine the consequences. I have a patient who went to sleep while climbing a ladder and fractured his femur. So you sleep in the most inappropriate situations, and that urge is so overpowering that it gets the better of you. There are other causes of excess sleepiness, including general medical causes, for example. You get up to pass urine at night, for example, and you feel very sleepy the next day. So there are lots of different conditions which do this. But the consequences of excessive daytime sleepiness should not be underestimated. As you and I know, after a night on call, for example, your physical and mental faculties are a bit dull. Your short-term memory goes. There's a lack of productivity. You have difficulty producing even a simple task which you would normally do as a routine. And you wouldn't like to trust yourself to a doctor, for example, or a pilot, for example, making important decisions if he is sleep deprived. Accidents occur at work and while driving, and with disastrous consequences. Immune dysfunction. What happens in lab experiments? You deprive rats of sleep for about 15 days, and they will succumb to sepsis. Your immune system breaks up when you don't get sleep. So never underestimate the importance of a good night's sleep. Not just for memory, but even in fighting off infections. The longest on record a human has gone without sleep was a young American teenager who has a bet really to get into the Guinness Book, went awake playing video games, watching TV for about 11 days before he had to be hospitalized in a fairly serious state. And of course we know that there are increased coronary events in those who sleep less than 5 hours a day. You have signs like this all across lonely highways in the West. Sleeping kills and sleeping accidents kill. 25% of motorway accidents of drivers falling asleep at the wheel. I'm not saying all of them have OSA, but some certainly do. Most are just sleep deprived because they partied the previous night or not slept enough the last night. But these accidents typically occur in the early morning or the mid-afternoon when you have a natural propensity to doze anyway. And these accidents are the most dangerous of all because a sleepy driver or one who is sleeping at the wheel basically cannot take any preventive measures. So it's a head-on, usually fatal collision. This is a lovely study where they looked at 3 groups, a control group, a group who had been given 4 drinks of alcohol, 4 units of alcohol, and a group of sleepy drivers. A group of patients with OSA. And they were made to play a driving simulation game on a PlayStation. And look at the errors in the control group, look at the errors in the alcohol group, and look at the errors in the OSA group, far more than someone who had drunk 4 units of alcohol. So when we talk about, of course, the dangers of alcohol-induced driving, bear in mind that a sleepy driver is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than someone who has imbibed a fair amount of alcohol. The last symptom is a witnessed apnea. Now this is the most specific symptom, the most important symptom. This is often GE reflux related. And in someone with advanced cardiac failure, Cheyne-Stokes respiration will do that. There is nothing else which can make you wake up at night choking in your sleep. And in a nutshell, these are the consequences of OSA. The patients with OSA have twice as much hypertension, thrice as much ischemic heart disease, 4 times as much cerebrovascular disease, and 7 times as many motor vehicular accidents, MVA, as a general group of patients. Now, all those who feel that OSA is not really something medically bad for you have to just look at this 10-minute strip from one of my patients' polysomnographies. This is his desaturation occurring over 1 to 10 minutes, and he's dropping every minute from about 90% saturation to about 50% saturation. This is happening every minute, every night of his life, probably been going on for decades. Now you can't tell me that that kind of nocturnal hypoxemia is not critically bad for you, especially if you have a background of ischemic heart disease, bad vessels, diabetes, etc. And the cardiovascular consequences are here for you to see, and I've listed them up here, and we'll go over a few of them. Because 50% of hypertension patients, if you look at them, will have OSA. About 30% of your IHP patients, about a quarter of all your cardiac failure patients, and about 60% of patients who have cerebrovascular disease will indeed have significant obstructive sleep apnea. As far as hypertension goes, the link is strong, and there is no denying it. It's part of a vascular risk cluster, the so-called syndrome Z. The BP levels related to OSA severity in a dose-dependent manner. There is no threshold effect. And the treatment of OSA with nasal CPAP will gratifyingly reduce your patient's blood pressure if you let it, especially consider OSA as a differential in someone who has refractory hypertension. Refer such a patient for a sleep study and you might be rewarded. And consider it when there is a blunted nocturnal BP decline. As you know, BP normally goes down at night, and when a sleep study shows, when an ambulatory BP study, shows that they are non-dippers, think of sleep apnea. Another example of surges in blood pressure every few minutes occurring in someone as he gets airflow obstruction on the lower frame. And these surges eventually at night, initially at night, eventually get set through the day and result in sometimes refractory hypertension. Links to a host of cardiovascular conditions, which I won't go into: thoracic aorta dissection, the metabolic syndrome. You all know Indians have the highest figures in the world, but you add to that OSA and you get something called syndrome Z. Coronary artery disease, again the link is strong. Acute MI and OSA, the link is strong. This is a very nice study from Australia. They took 100 patients on the day of discharge after they'd all suffered a myocardial infarction and looked at risk factors. And of course you have the traditional risk factors like obesity, like hypertension, like smoking. But even more powerful than all of these was an apnea-hypopnea index of more than 5, i.e. obstructive sleep apnea, as a risk factor for them having developed that acute myocardial infarction. Of course, you can imagine how it can cause nocturnal angina if you have a background of ischemic heart disease and then go on to desaturate, like I showed you. You have a range of cardiac arrhythmias like heart blocks occurring in sleep, and these patients are often fitted up with pacemakers when all they need is a CPAP machine. Another example, a patient who has a long asystole lasting a long period of time. This could culminate in a cardiac arrest really, and it corresponds with a period of prolonged apnea in sleep as well. Atrial fibrillation, nice study from the Mayo Clinic, 150 patients referred for cardioversion for AF, matched with controls, and 50% of the AF group had OSA when they were tested for this. Links with dilated cardiomyopathy, and perhaps it should be part of the workup in someone who has a dilated cardiomyopathy. And of course, a strong link with congestive cardiac failure. Many types of sleep disordered breathing can occur, not just obstruction, but also central apneas or Cheyne-Stokes respiration. And this is some work that we did on about 70 patients with congestive cardiac failure, showing that they had obstruction, they had central apneas and Cheyne-Stokes respiration, and only a fraction actually had completely normal sleep studies. And this is a classic picture from one of our patients again of Cheyne-Stokes respiration, and you can see this waxing and waning pattern in the patient's respiration, usually in people with advanced cardiac failure, and it's a very, very bad prognostic sign when it occurs, because this is cardiac failure without Cheyne-Stokes, and this is with Cheyne-Stokes, and you can see that the mortality is significantly different. It's a bad marker. And of course, we have gratifying treatment for this. Like digoxin, for example, can improve your pump function. In someone with cardiac failure and Cheyne-Stokes respiration, CPAP might well be the perfect drug in terms of improving that patient's actual pump function. Cardiac failure and sleep disordered breathing, we've discussed. I'll leave this slide. And this was a slide I made for some cardiologists when I was asked to lecture to them, and it didn't go down very well with a group of cardiologists, as you can imagine. But I said that the link between OSA and cardiovascular disease is now irrefutable. We know it does, and we have evidence of the underlying mechanisms and the natural history. The challenge is entirely different. In 2004, most editorials in OSA occurred mainly in general medical journals and in chest journals, not in cardiovascular journals. So cardiologists have yet to embrace the idea that OSA does cause significant cardiovascular mortality. By the time OSA is diagnosed with their patients, they've already accumulated considerable atherosclerotic insults. Early diagnosis, early treatment is essential. We need to stop joking about OSA and its symptoms, saying snoring is a bit funny, sleepiness equals laziness. You wouldn't joke about someone who's had an MI or a stroke, yet these are conditions which would go on to that. And I would go on to say that not asking your cardiac patients questions about sleep and snoring may be as negligent as not measuring their blood pressure. You would always do that, and you need to ask those questions really. And we need to train ourselves and our colleagues. Of course, OSA can be linked, as you can imagine, to sudden cardiac death as well, and several studies have shown the link. I think Mark Twain was only half joking when he said, don't go to sleep, too many people die there. Now, this disease was felt to be a rare condition in our part of the world till I think a study which we did from the Hinduja Hospital put it on the sort of world sleep map at least, because we showed in this particular study, and I'll run through the study because it was a difficult study to perform, and we found that the actual OSA prevalence was 7%. Now 7% in a country like India is a huge, huge fraction. In fact, putting that up on the epidemiological map compared to other studies, this figure is higher than even in the West, where you think obesity is a very huge factor and you're more likely to get OSA. Perhaps it's our facial phenotype which makes us more prone to it. I can't be quite sure. Our patients are less obese, but they all have thick necks. And we found that a collar size more than 17 inches is a strong correlator of possible OSA. These are the ways OSA may present to a physician: unexplained respiratory failure, unexplained pulmonary hypertension or pulmonal. Many patients who label COPD stuck on a ventilator may in effect have actual OSA, or at least an overlap syndrome. I get references from hematologists for unexplained polycythemia because nocturnal hypoxemia will stimulate erythropoietin, a confusional state, a nocturnal seizure, a nocturnal arrhythmia, a post-anesthetic disaster, or a post-extubation problem. Just some of the ways these patients can present. And the natural history of this disease is that it's a graded spectrum or a continuum, like hypertension, like diabetes. You start snoring when you're in your teens, and it evolves over the decades, and you only picked up sadly when you really fall asleep at all occasions. The sleep evaluation involves asking the right questions, doing the relevant simple physical examination, and then following it up with a sleep study or polysomnography, because your clinical impression is only 60% sensitive and 70% specific in diagnosing this condition. So you need to monitor all these different parameters, and that's what a polysomnography does. It does it on a beat-by-beat, second-by-second level, and there are various types which I won't go into: a complete, a multi-channel, a home oximetry, which is a poor man's polysomnography, but which will miss about 30% of patients with OSA, even of significant degree. You can do your study at home or in the hospital, supervised or unsupervised, a single night or a split night, where you start the CPAP right away. And this is a study being done at our sleep lab at India. And you can see this patient being set up for the night there. And this is a small portable machine which will come to your house gladly if you phone the technician, and he will perform the same study and give the same information to you in the comfort of your bedroom. And this is the kind of data you get on the screen, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. It's not too difficult. A month of training, and all of you can learn how to interpret this. And again, you can see the significant desaturation occurring in this patient repeatedly through the night. The last few slides: if you cannot make a diagnosis, at least make a decision. And the treatment of OSA, once you've decided to treat it, is as follows. You have non-medical measures, of which weight reduction is the most important. You ask your patient to avoid alcohol as far as possible. The patient is urged to sleep on his side because apneas are always worst in the supine flat position. And someone clever sewed a tennis ball onto the back of a pajama, and that has become a fairly standard, cheap treatment of OSA. And of course, globally, the commonest treatment of OSA is the spouse's elbow. When she gives you a nudge, you restart your breathing cycle, and I guess 90% of patients with OSA must be treated this way. But the gold standard, of course, is CPAP therapy. I'm mentioning these, but we don't have a very high opinion of either oral appliances or surgical procedures for the treatment of OSA. And this very clever Australian Sydney professor of medicine, Colin Sullivan, was the man who put OSA on the global map, really, with a simple 2-page article in the Lancet where he spoke about treatment of CPAP, treatment with CPAP in 5 patients with OSA. was a very simple article. It took a while to get acceptance, as you can see with any radical idea. It was a completely radical idea at that time. It's basically a pneumatic spin. It's like applying a hair dryer, a hair blower from your wife to the back of your throat, because it opens the airway irrespective of the site of obstruction. And you cannot pinpoint the site of obstruction. It's a dynamic obstruction occurring in these patients. It's the gold standard. It's safe. It's non-invasive. You can apply it to all ages and all severity of OSA. And it's immediately, demonstrably effective. There's no more satisfying condition to treat, because a dull, confused, obtunded patient after one night of CPAP is transformed into someone completely different. It can be tried and withdrawn, of course, if your patient cannot get the hang of it, unlike surgery, but that's rare. And this was Sullivan's original machine, which was so large and so noisy, it had to be housed in a separate room from where the patient was. But we have a whole new generations of machines, which are getting sleeker and slimmer and more portable. And this is our youngest patient with OSA, a 4-year-old child with the Prader-Willi syndrome, characterized by morbid obesity and OSA. And he's now 15 and still uses it, so even a child can be trained to use this quite happily. And this is a husband and wife who are waving happily for the camera. Both of them have OSA, and both take it every night. And the benefits are that it rapidly reverses your desaturations, your arousals, your apneas, and improves your quality of life. You may wonder who's going to take this cumbersome treatment, but believe me, patients will cheat on their TB drugs, on their asthma drugs, but they will not cheat with this treatment, because they see the benefit. And conversely, if they stop using it for a night or two, they see themselves going back to their dull, drowsy former states. So compliance with this treatment is dramatically good, more than any other medical intervention. It reduces sleepiness in just one night. It completely eliminates snoring, so the spouse is happy as well. It improves your vigilance, your driving risks go down. It reduces your vascular risks, your hypertension, cardiac failure risks, and this is an area of fertile research. And it does save lives. It reduces mortality, normalizing your survival within about 5 years of use. CPAP significantly reduced mortality in this study, while OSA tripled it without treatment. It reduces your driving risk driving accidents, by almost 50%. And basically, it remains the gold standard for most forms of OSA. The absence of any viable drug treatment for this disease will ensure that this remains the standard treatment, at least for the next few decades. Its main use is to improve daytime function. Of course, it eliminates snoring, and that's a bonus. It may have a role in decreasing cardiovascular risk. And this is my last slide. It's a lovely painting by Henri Matisse, The Dream it's entitled. And I've said here, sleep is a reward for some, but as you've seen, a punishment for others. Thank you very much.
Now we have about 7 cases of OSA.
Half of our people lunch and appreciation to like your small and for chairing the session. Before we proceed on to the next session, a small announcement. We have applied to NMC for activation, and the hours to be approved. Small formality needs to be done. We will pass on a register which the delegation is to sign along with their name of organizations. I would humbly request each one of you to please complete the formality.
Trained physicians in occupational health. And this center was started by Dr. Chandrasekaran. To make his journey short, he completed his medical graduation from Stanley Medical College, Chennai, and did his post-graduation in occupational medicine from the All India Institute of Public Health and Hygiene, Calcutta. He's participated in several national and international conferences and has over 15 publications in Indian journals on various aspects of occupational health. He was awarded the prestigious BHEL Award in '87, and he delivered the L&T Oration in 2001. He had vast experience of more than 30 years in the field of occupational health, and recently retired as the Chief Medical Officer of the National Model Center of OHS, BHEL, Trichy in 2008 April. Currently, he works as a consultant in occupational medicine stress management, homeopathic medicine, holistic health care, and is also a visiting faculty to the School of Public Health, SRM Medical College, Chennai. The National Model Center for OHS, BHEL, Trichy, and the National Institute of Technology, Trichy. So I now request Dr. Chandrasekaran to deliver the prestigious PM Bhansali oration.
Executive Committee members of Mumbai branch of IAOH and the Advisory Council, and my dear colleagues of IAOH, thankful to the Mumbai branch of IAOH for having me given this honor of getting this Bhansali Oration Award. And I dedicate this lecture to none other than Dr. Bhansali, the father of occupational medicine, because he wrote the first book, De Morbis Artificium Diatriba, in the 17th century. Even the great Greek philosopher Hippocrates, whom I often admire most, we talk about lifestyles, but he talked about food, exercise, etc. in 4th BC. But unfortunately, he did not talk anything about the impact of occupation on health. Probably slaves were the employees then. And Dr. Bhansali was the person who asked his colleagues to ask your employees one pertinent question, and that is, what is your occupation? Today we often ask the employees, the corporate hospitals and the institutions about the job title to mainly know under which category they will be charged. It is aptly titled as In the Footprints of Time, a 3-decade occupational health practice, and I would like to share operation doctors or municipality doctors. Here this cartoon says the doctor specializes in preventive medicine, so if you are already sick, you are not interested. But treatment and prevention are mutually exclusive. And why this topic? After all, we have not felt the need of occupational health practice. We often say we have made leaps and bounds in this branch, in this country in the last 30 or 40 years. But still it is in its nascent stages. The doctors who practice occupational health, who call themselves as faculty medical officers, have still not got into the groove of occupational health. The Bhopal tragedy, till then, nothing was done in the legislation part of it in this country. Not many provisions were there. In fact, the term occupational health did not find place in the Factories Act of Govt of India. The aftermath of Bhopal tragedy saw millions of people having been disabled or thousands of people dying. Then the government awoke from the long slumber and made the amendments and introduced the term occupational health into the Factory Act. But you would be surprised to know the first recommendation of occupational health at the place of work was made by a joint ILO WHO committee in the year 1952. It made it obligatory on the part of the employers and the governments should have occupational health service at the place of employment. But none of the governments enacted all these things. We used to have employers representatives, employees, trade union representatives, and the government representatives in this tripartite forum, and none of them took the initiative in most of the developing countries. So it remained a dream for many people for almost more than 40 years. Probably BHEL was a pioneer in the year 1976. We started our first occupational health service. Why occupational health practice? Why at all you should practice occupational health? Because of the simple fact that the work environment is hazardous. There is no job without any risk. There is no job devoid of risk. As risk lurks everywhere. Even in a beautiful rose, you see as thorn is there, like that. Life is full of risks. Every occupation is with abundant risks. And 30 to 50% of the workforce report exposure to physical, chemical and biological hazards in this world